Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The elections to the Constituent Assembly in Nepal, held on November 19th, went off rather peacefully, though the outcome and process following it does not seem to be as smooth. While the counting for the 240 seats in the first past the post system have been finished, the seats which come under the proportional representation are still being counted. However, it's pretty clear that the people of Nepal have rejected the Maoists led by Prachanda and also the Madhesis, even as they have chosen to back the oldest party, the Nepali Congress, and the more moderate CPN-UML. The country is headed for a coalition government. However, what is disturbing is the boycott of the counting by the badly mauled Prachanda-led Maoists and also the Madhesis, alleging that there has been large-scale fraud and widespread conspiracy against them. They have also threatened to boycott the Constituent Assembly. Nepal, which has struggled to write a constitution for last over a decade through 6 governments, is badly in need of a Constituent Assembly which can finally draw up a constitution. Will this newly elected assembly be able to do that? What are the challenges which the new assembly will face in doing that? What does this resounding election defeat of the Maoists mean for their future? We will discuss all this today with former Indian ambassador to Nepal, Dr. Jayant Prasad, Dr. Baladas Ghoshal, Senior Fellow, Center for Policy Research, Vijay Pratap, Chairperson, Indo-Nepal Forum on Democracy. Welcome to all of you. Dr. Prasad, the way the Maoists have rejected the counting, rejected the elections, and are now saying that they want a commission to inquire into it, and they're also threatening to boycott the Constituent Assembly. You think they're just being bad losers, or do you think that there is some substance to their allegations?
Well, just as they were the surprise winners in the 2008 elections, they are the surprise losers in this election. And the shock has been too big for them. It's a little bit of a rallying cry they can keep...
Is it just a shock to them, or is it a shock to all observers like you also?
No, it's not a shock to observers, but it's a shock to them because they held the premiership twice. Right in the beginning and right at the end. And in the end, the whole process became quite messy because the incumbent Prime Minister, Dr. Bhattarai, had called for elections when the CA was dissolved in the month of May last year. And the elections were supposed to be held in November.
Yes.
And for a variety of reasons which had nothing to do with Dr. Bhattarai himself, but the inacceptability by the democratic forces of fighting elections under a Maoist government, that elections could not be held.
Right.
And he considered for a moment resigning when he couldn't do the elections on time. But that whole process of getting a transition government in place took up to the month of March this year. And in the process, public really got disenchanted and upset. And also the anti-incumbency factor made them suffer. So I don't take their boycott call and boycotting of the counting, etc., as seriously as many others do, because last night, the Vice President of the party, who was also Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Nepal, Narayan Kaji Shresht, he said that the party must accept the verdict of the people.
There seems to be a division of opinion within the party.
Right. And the leadership of the party really is in a quandary. They don't know what to do because they want to keep their folk together and they don't want them to further get disheartened and disperse, and especially walk over to the more rabid faction, the more sectarian, the more extremist faction led by Mohan Vaidya Kiran.
Right. So, okay, I think we are now joined in on the phone line by DP Tripathi, MP of the Nationalist Congress Party. DPT, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Tripathi, the results of the elections in Nepal, I'm sure you must have been watching very closely and following it also. Do you see this elections as some kind of a path-breaking event which has happened there? And how do you see the kind of decimation which the Maoists have suffered there?
No, this is not a decimation. This is rejection of their political stance by the people of Nepal. It has been a free and fair election, and the Nepali Congress emerging as the largest party shows the democratic commitment of the people of Nepal. The problem is that Nepalese Maoists who joined the mainstream have been committing blunders after blunders. As friends, I have been telling them this. And again, this boycott call of counting and constituent assembly is another political blunder, because they should very humbly accept the verdict of the people and then mobilize themselves politically. In politics, you do not always win in democratic politics. You should accept your defeat also with grace and dignity.
The problem that seems to be that grace and dignity is missing. Do you think this is part of the problem of the political party? The people of Nepal seem to have accepted the democratic process and they have ushered in the democracy pretty well. But the political party seems to be having some problem in accepting a democratic structure.
Not on political parties.
Not all political parties.
It is not merely the Maoists who have suffered. Look at the Madhesi parties, the way they have suffered. So it is not merely many of the smaller parties. See, in Nepal, these elections have suffered. These elections have been decisive in many ways.
Right.
That people have voted for principal political parties. 1, 2, 3.
Right.
So they should accept the verdict of the people. This is what is essential for functioning a democratic system.
Yeah. Okay. Please stay on, DPT. If we can get you on the line, I'll come back to you, Dr. Ghoshal. Dr. Ghoshal, this boycott of the elections and all that, there were parties which were boycotting the elections also earlier, but they have, now that the people have very clearly stated, and as Mr. Tripathi also said, it's been a free and fair elections. Most of the people who are observers there have also said that. Now you think that this kind of a result will herald some kind of a new approach towards the Constituent Assembly making there? What kind of challenges do these two parties, the two main parties, Nepali Congress and the UC, UCPM, which has now got the two parties which have got majority seats? How should they go about it?
I have an expression which might describe somewhat the phenomena in many of these countries. Despite the doctors, the patient survives. Now, despite the political parties, I think the people have shown that they want certain amount of stability.
Right.
They don't want any more of that crisis and strikes and life coming to a halt.
Right.
Now, once having said that, now, although the outcome shows that the two major political parties are going to get fair amount of seats, but they are not going to have majority either of them.
So a coalition government is
a coalition government. But the point that which I made also in earlier occasion here, that it's one thing to have a parliament which is fractured.
Yes.
But another thing to have a constituent assembly which is fractured. Because in any democracy, constitution making is the most important aspect of any exercise in democracy. Without that exercise, you can't have any semblance of democracy, because it's the rule of law. Now, my fear comes about the lack of consensus among the political parties about what should be the basis of the state in Nepal, whether it should be a presidential form of government or whether
I
it should
think
be
that
another
these are the things which the Constituent Assembly will need to discuss and come.
My fear is that even though we can expect some kind of a sort of debate on that issue, but the earlier experience shows that it is still a very fractured polity.
Absolutely.
And very difficult to come into any kind of an agreement on the basic issues. And I think I did give you the example of other in the history. If you look at even India's own experience,
exactly.
Even before we had a parliament of any sort, we had a constitution.
Yes.
And in the constituent making, there was a lot of consensus.
Yes.
In fact, the political parties were at least, even though they had differences on many issues, but about the structure of the government, about what should guide the basic principles of the state, on which there was a lot of agreement and consensus, and they built it over a period of time.
That was
Now, in the case of
during
Nepal,
during the entire freedom struggle, there was this, the constant debates were happening, and there was some
democracy,
kind of
democracy is not a product you can pick up and then
Exactly.
start using it.
Exactly.
I think it requires a little bit of nurturing. And I think for that nurturing, that process of experience, I think Nepal has not gone through as yet.
So, your concerns and apprehensions are valid. Vijay, you think these concerns which Dr. Ghoshal is expressing are valid concerns? They seem very valid. But do you think that the Nepali people, the Nepali political parties, with these two major political parties, which are now, virtually the onus is on them now to work out a consensus and all that. Do you think these two parties have it within them to work out that kind of a consensus?
I think whether they have or not, the ground pressure is that they will have to work out. Both on federalism.
The ordinary people of Nepal will expect them to do.
Yes, there were two critical aspirations. One was of federalism, non-monarchy, that has been accomplished, and the other is to create an inclusive state.
Right.
Now, if these parties, which are older parties
Yes.
and seen as relatively conservative, according to at least Maoist apologists,
Relatively moderate, you can call it.
no,
And
in terms
conservative
of
also.
inclusion, they were more, dithering and,
Yeah.
less forthcoming.
Right.
It was only the People's War, even for populist reason, it might be inauthentic, but we have to give credit to the devil. Maoists raised the issues of inclusion, and now it is society's agenda.
Right.
Whether even the Maoist party structure is not that inclusive, but the society has brought forward leadership from the bottom, and now the process can't be folded back. So the parties have to get together, although the two major parties yet have not achieved two-third majority,
Yes.
which is necessary to seal the constitution. But all Madhesi parties put together, they do constitute two-third majority, and the popular expectation and pressure is such that constitution will be delivered in time. That's my hope, and that's my assessment also.
Dr. Prasad, you think that what some of the people who are writing from Nepal and Kathmandu and all are saying is this: there was this radical and ethnic agenda of certain parties. You think that the results, what we are seeing now, means that the people have rejected those agendas?
Well, that is one part of it, but there was the Jan Andolan of 2006. Basically, it had an agenda of inclusion and multi-party democracy.
Right.
And it had several other components, including an agreement in principle that there would be some form of federalism in Nepal. I don't think any of the major parties have resiled from that position. In fact, the constitution is going to be made, and I'm equally confident that it would be so, simply because the parties after their election victory have reiterated their commitment to proceed to constitution making on the agreed principles. Now, how they are operationalized, there is a difference.
They had failed twice.
No,
We should
they had
remember
failed
this.
for some very special and perhaps understandable reasons, because there were two things that had to be accomplished after 2008. One was the process of integration of Maoist combatants to end the separate existence of the People's Liberation Army. That only happened 6 weeks before the closure of the CA. And the Maoist party was using the presence of the Maoist fighters in the cantonments, which were policed by them, as a leverage that if they went into elections without this problem settled, there would be a problem. So they handed over and disbanded and gave a golden handshake to most of the combatants. The cantonments were taken over by the government, so also the containers with the weapons in them. And some members of the PLA actually joined the Nepal army. Some 1642 of them volunteered to join.
So are you saying that the Maoists are completely disarmed now?
Absolutely, there is no
There's
question about it.
So there's no question of them going back.
There is very little likelihood that Nepal is going to see the kind of civil war that existed in the 10 years preceding 2006. That is for sure, unless in the constitution making exercise, there is a deliberate move by conservative forces to completely renege on the objectives of the 2006 Jan Andolan, which neither of the two parties has an inclination to do. Actually, the Congress party, which has won the Nepali Congress, has been the standard bearer for democracy in Nepal. They fought in 1950, they fought in 1959, they fought the first Jan Andolan.
They have all the experience necessary.
Absolutely, and they are in touch with the people because they have come with the people's mandate. They would be sensitive to the aspirations of the people, which would be reflected in the new constitution.
Mr. Tripathi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, and these doubts being expressed, if some of the write-ups coming from Kathmandu, there is a sense of disappointment in the way the Maoists have reacted, in the way the Madhesis have reacted. But what I was asking, Ambassador, also, I'm asking the same question to you. Do you think that the Maoists will now have to reconcile to the democratic process? There will be no going back as far as they are concerned.
As far as I understand the Nepalese situation, for Maoists there is no going back to the civil war strategy. No question. Second is this vote. If you look at this vote by the people of Nepal, this is a vote for stability and constitution.
Right.
And therefore, the Maoists must accept the systemic stability and the desire of the people and aspiration of the people for a constitution and for a democratic system completely put in order.
Right.
That delivery of the constitution by this election is the essential component, and therefore I don't think that this time the CA will fail in its basic duty. Basic duty is make the constitution. And the Maoists should agree with other political parties while opposing them politically. In democracy, you oppose various political parties. Absolutely. If you are in the opposition. But the boycott is no solution.
Okay. Dr. Ghoshal, the boycott is no solution, as Tripathi says. But the point is that these people themselves are saying that we'll boycott the Constituent Assembly. How important will it be for whoever heads the government or whoever is part of the government to bring these people into the process? Or do you think that whatever is the elected members, they will be able to work out some kind of work out the constitution process?
I think whoever comes into the majority as two parties, they will have to do something to at least bring them into the mainstream.
Right.
Those who are opposing it. If they try to have a confrontation, then there are possibilities of violence and other things.
Right.
Because even though they might have lost in the elections, I think they still can pull their muscle that way.
So you think that they still have a standing in the country, and they'll still have their base intact?
The nuisance value is there. I mean, they can create some problems. And again, as I was trying to emphasize the fact that at the stage of framing the constitution, there has to be some amount of compromises and some amount of generosity and benevolence on the part of the victors also towards the one which are defeated. Now, until and unless that is done, I don't think a constitution is complete if you can't take along the entire body politic along with you. So from that sense, I fear a certain amount of uncertainty in the constitution.
Well, let me get Mr. Tripathi now. Mr. Tripathi, how difficult will that process be of trying to convince these people who are threatening to boycott, who are keeping away, and you think that if they continue to keep away, will the constitution making process be possible at all? Mr. Tripathi? I think we have lost him. We'll come back to him. I want to ask the same question to you, Vijay. You think that if they try to keep if these people, because we have already read today that the Nepali Congress leaders, Koirala has gone and met Prachanda, and they're trying to work on them. But if these people keep out of it, do you think that the Constituent Assembly process will have the same legitimacy?
I think the kind of popular pressure is there. They just can't keep themselves out of the Constituent Assembly. They will be there and they will have respectable figure. From PR and from the first past the post system, the total will be around 70 or 70 plus.
So that should be a respectable number.
Respectable number.
But because now the numbers look really dismal.
No,
They just 26
because
seats,
we
they
have
won
the
just
last,
26 seats.
No,
in the
no,
first
but
pass.
in PR they will get that much, about 40 plus seats. So that will be a respectable number. I'll go a step further. Not these Maoists, I am quite sure, Mr. Prachand and the party is quite a pragmatic party, and Vice President Narayan Kazi Shrestha has already made his mind clear. So there is no question
But
of
there
their
seems
staying
to be
out.
differences of opinion within the party. You think they will be able to
No,
overcome
this was
those
more
differences?
like public consumption. They needed 2 days to, what position they could have taken.
No, as Mr. Ambassador said that it was a shock to them, also surprise and shock to them.
Yeah, so it was just to come to terms with the result. They were not serious even at the first press conference when they announced the boycott of the counting. They were all, their cadres were around and they were keenly watching.
This was only some kind of a public posturing which they were doing.
And to come to terms with the
And
results.
to come to terms with themselves.
And they seem to be coming to terms now. So they'll be there. I would go a step further. To add authenticity, you require some kind of time for deconditioning your minds. I am referring to Mohan Kiran Vaidya's party. They were willing to participate, that they wanted, some more time. But the point is, rest of the society didn't believe them, because they were talking about the people's revolt and all that. So if they have make their mind, they should come back on board, and some respectable mechanism to have them also on board outside Constituent Assembly or through government nomination. There are 26 seats which are to be
filled by the government.
Yeah.
I think we got Tripathi, Mr. Tripathi on the line. Mr. Tripathi, earlier in the discussion, Dr. Ghoshal, Dr. Baladas Ghoshal was expressing some concerns about, the democratic process or thinking within Nepal, that, they're still not clear what kind of a system they want. There is no consensus, even a loose consensus on what kind of a system doesn't prevail. So you think that this whole Constituent Assembly process, without that kind of a consensus when they actually sit to discuss, can become a problem?
See, through these elections, people have voted for a broad consensus. As I said in the beginning, is stability and constitution. Now, there can be debate in the Constituent Assembly of which form of democratic government you want, whether presidential form, parliamentary form, but there is a broad agreement, as Vijay Pratap said earlier, and Ambassador Jayant Prasad said, which is emerging in Nepal through the democratic process, is on democracy, multi-party democracy, on federalism, on devolution of power. These are the broad issues. Inclusive democracy.
Yes.
These are the basic factors on which there is a broad agreement in the Nepalese society, and the people have voted accordingly. And the major political parties, including the Maoists,
yes,
voice these issues. They are the ones, these political parties, which give real voice to these basic issues on which the Nepalese people have broadly agreed. And therefore the political parties will definitely find a consensus, and I think that this Constituent Assembly would be able to deliver the Constitution in consultation with even those parties which did not participate in the election.
Yes.
There has to be a mechanism of consultation.
Right, absolutely. And I think the Nepali Congress leaders have already started that process of consultation. I'll come back to you later, Mr. Tripathi, Ambassador Prasad. My question is that, they were during the campaign and during the last few months of all that, the Madhesis had their own demand, which was seen as rather not so practical. And now this, whether there will be a federal structure or not, and things like that. Now, in all this, where does the Indian, how much has the Indian government played a part so far, and how much will the Indian government have to play a part in the future to create that kind of a system in that country?
Well, the Indian government can play only a limited part in this, because the Indian government's historic behavior in Nepal has been, it has always stood behind the Nepalese people. When there was the overthrow of 104 years of Rana autocracy, when there was the movement for democracy in 59, when there was the first Jan Andolan in 1990, and again in the second Jan Andolan in 2006, when Nepal declared itself to be a republic, when parliament was reconstituted, what the Nepalese people wanted was what government of India endorsed and gave support for it.
So we don't have our own ideas for them.
We don't have ideas for them, because some of the ideas on which they are divided are highly divisive issues for internally in Nepal, and it doesn't do Indian government any good to take sides on it. For instance, the question of federalism.
Right.
I mean, how can we be prescriptive about federalism in Nepal when our constitution, although we have states and although nobody can say India is not a federation, we don't use the word federation or federalism in our constitution. It's a division of powers between the center and states. And this is a difficult issue for them. But what is heartening about Nepal, and this is something that people forget, Nepal is the unique example in the world where after a civil war, those who fought the civil war, the protagonists have come together. They have had a series of agreements and understandings. And what is important is last Thursday, Prachand's first statement after the all-night counting was finished, and the Maoist party knew they were going to lose heavily. The Central Committee of the party was meeting the whole night. When his statement came out, it said very clearly at the end of the statement that they completely accept the past understandings and agreements that they have entered into with the democratic forces in Nepal, which means the 12-point agreement, which means the comprehensive peace settlement. And on the part of the Congress also, there is a similar gesture. The former Prime Minister G.P. Korala, who is no more, he is the one responsible for bringing the Maoists into the mainstream. And I'm sure that the present leadership will show similar magnanimity.
Dr. Ghoshal, very quickly, we are completely running out of time. Very quickly, last discussion we had on Nepal, you were also on this panel here. There was not much. There were some people who were not very optimistic about what would happen. You think that after today, at this point of time, are you a little more optimistic than we were last time?
Oh, surely.
You think that this assembly will be able to work out a constitution?
At least the verdict shows that, because the two major political parties have got sufficient number of seats, and that shows that people really want stability.
Okay.
And that's why I suggested that it is the people who are really putting the pressure
very
on the
quickly.
political parties.
You think
if Nepal's Bar Council, Bar Association, media and rest of the civil society makes right kind of noises, they could deliver the constitution earlier than committed, that is 1 year.
I think on that note, we need, on that very optimistic note of Vijay, Pratap, we'll end this program. We'll wait and watch closely what will happen in Nepal in the coming days and weeks. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. D.P. Tripathi, Ambassador Jayant Prasad, Dr. Baladas, Ghoshal and Vijay Pratap. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.